Welcome to this explainer. Figuring out what, when, and exactly how to feed a Chihuahua can feel incredibly overwhelming. So if you're trying to navigate their unique biology and highly specific nutritional needs, you are in the perfect place. We're going to unpack the actual science and the practical rules to keep your tiny companion thriving at every single stage of life.
Okay, let's look at our roadmap for today. We'll be diving into the tiny dog dilemma, Chihuahua physiology explained, feeding by life stage, solving sensitive stomachs, food types and transitions, and we'll wrap up with the essential feeding rules.
Starting right off with Section 1, the tiny dog dilemma, small dog, big challenges. This quote right here perfectly captures the trap so many of us fall into. You bring home this adorable, tiny dog, grab a small bag of generic kibble off the shelf, fill up a little bowl, and think, she weighed just 4 pounds. How complicated could it possibly be? Well, spoiler alert, it's actually incredibly complicated.
And honestly, you find that out pretty fast. Within just a few weeks, owners often face this stressful cascade of problems. Suddenly, your dog turns into a picky eater who completely refuses meals. You're dealing with occasional vomiting, loose stools, and this really noticeable drop in their energy levels. It's a massive wake-up call that these tiny dogs require a completely different, highly intentional approach to feeding.
So let's get into Section 2, Chihuahua Physiology Explained, Why Biology Matters.
To fix these frustrating dietary issues, we really have to look under the hood at the science. The most crucial thing to understand is their metabolic rate. Their tiny bodies burn energy so rapidly that a missed meal isn't just an inconvenience, it's a medical risk. It can quickly lead to hypoglycemia, which is a dangerous drop in blood sugar that triggers weakness, shaking, or even worse.
You literally cannot treat them like miniature versions of a golden retriever. Because they weigh so little, every single calorie has a massive impact. If you overfeed them, they gain weight dangerously fast. And if you give them rich or low-quality foods, it almost immediately triggers their highly sensitive digestive systems.
Because of this delicate physiology, there are 5 non-negotiable things you need to look for in their food. First, you need very small, easy-to-chew kibble to protect their fragile little teeth. Second, look for a real, specifically named protein, like chicken or lamb, as the very first ingredient. Third, keep the fat content moderate to stop that vomiting we just talked about. Fourth, look for built-in digestive support, like probiotics or pumpkin. And lastly, absolutely zero artificial additives or colors, which are notorious for upsetting their stomachs. Let's move on to Section 3, Feeding by Life Stage, Puppies, Adults, and Seniors. Now this is where the science of puppy growth gets super fascinating. Chihuahua puppies are basically tiny metabolic marvels. Think about it. Their resting heart rates and core temperatures require an astonishing amount of energy just to maintain. And because they have virtually zero fat reserves, the intense caloric burn required to fuel rapid brain development and build out their skeletal frame means they process food incredibly fast. To support all this rapid growth and prevent those scary blood sugar crashes, they absolutely must have 3 to 4 small, nutrient-dense meals every single day. Then, as they mature into adults, their needs shift to muscle maintenance, so you scale back to 2 or 3 meals a day with specific protein and fat targets so you don't overwhelm their system. And as they reach their senior years, their biology shifts all over again. Digestion naturally slows down, and dental disease often becomes a really big hurdle. So senior Chihuahuas need formulas that specifically combat aging joints, stuff packed with glucosamine. And they require easily chewed softened kibble or wet food so that eating doesn't become a painful chore for them.
Section 4, Solving Sensitive Stomachs, Digestive Troubleshooting.
Sensitive stomachs are arguably the most common issue for this breed, which brings us to the number 1 most terrifying question owners ask. Why does my Chihuahua vomit after eating? More often than not, it boils down to the food being too rich and fatty, a sudden diet switch you made without transitioning, or simply the dog eating too much volume all at once. To troubleshoot this, you have to match the symptom to the strategy. If they're vomiting right after meals, try smaller portions and look for a lower fat content. If you're dealing with loose stools or a lot of gas, switch them to a limited ingredient diet that uses easily digestible grains like rice instead of corn. And if they're itching combined with stomach issues, that's classic food allergy territory, meaning you should pivot to a single alternative protein, like salmon or duck, and completely avoid common triggers, like chicken and beef.
Section 5, Food Types and Transitions, Getting the Diet Just Right.
Finding the right formula is honestly only half the battle.
When we look at dry kibble versus wet food, both have very real scientific advantages. Kibble is amazing for mechanically cleaning their tiny teeth, which are highly prone to decay. Wet food, on the other hand, provides critical hydration and is incredibly appealing to picky eaters. Honestly, a highly effective strategy is just mixing a little bit of wet food right into their dry kibble. It entices them to eat, keeping their blood sugar stable, while still giving them those crucial dental benefits.
Now, if you do decide to change their diet, you must strictly follow this transition method over 7 to 10 days. Days 1 and 2, it's 25% new food. Days 3 and 4, 50%. Days 5 and 6, 75%. And finally, 100% by day 7 to 10. If you rush a food switch in a Chihuahua, I guarantee you're going to be dealing with severe vomiting, diarrhea, and a dog who refuses to eat. Patience is key here.
Section 6. Essential Feeding Rules. The Golden Guidelines.
10%. That is the absolute maximum percentage of your dog's daily calories that should ever come from treats. For a 5-pound dog eating barely a third of a cup of food all day, that means treats need to be practically microscopic. So you can go ahead and put the giant milk bones back on the shelf. You also need to aim for 1 ounce, specifically 1 ounce of water per pound of body weight every single day. Proper hydration supports their organ function, and because their body mass is so tiny, dehydration can set in remarkably fast.
Getting your portion sizes right honestly matters more than almost anything else, even brand selection. This table gives you a fantastic baseline. A 3 to 4 pound dog only needs about a quarter cup per day, divided up into meals. But remember, this is just a starting point. You've got to actively adjust this based on feeling their ribs and watching their daily energy levels.
We also need to touch on the grain debate, and it's important to look at this neutrally. The FDA has been actively investigating potential links between grain-free diets and a heart condition called DCM. Because of this ongoing research, most veterinarian consensus currently favors grain-inclusive diets, which use healthy, fibrous grains like rice or oats, unless your specific vet has diagnosed your dog with a strict grain allergy. And of course, always completely avoid these highly toxic items: chocolate, grapes, onions, garlic, xylitol, and macadamia nuts. But beyond the famous poisons, you absolutely have to resist the just a little extra trap with table scraps. Giving a Chihuahua just a single extra tablespoon of human food is like us eating an entire extra meal. It rapidly causes severe obesity. Ultimately, you can read every single label in the pet store, but your dog's body is going to give you the clearest answers. Are they energetic? Is their coat shiny? Is their digestion predictable? The absolute best food is the one they consistently thrive on. So, based on the science we've covered today, take a look at your tiny companion this week. What small adjustment can you make today to ensure they truly thrive? Think about that. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.